If this story hits close to home, drop a like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. She said it my pareja casually that it almost didn't land. Almost. Marcus paid for the suite. I owe him a good time. Those 11 words sat in the air between us like smoke from a fire she didn't think I could see. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I just looked at her and said, "Text me the room number." She couldn't have known what that request would set in motion, because the man she'd spent years underestimating had been quietly building something she'd never see coming. My name is Derek Calloway. I'm 49 years old, and the last 2.5 decades of my life have been devoted to building a logistics consulting practice focused on automotive supply chains. Nothing flashy, nothing that gets written up in magazines, but honest work, and it's treated us well. My daughter from my first marriage, Paige, is 28 now. She's a corporate attorney with sharp instincts and a zero-tolerance policy for nonsense she inherited somewhere between my gene pool and her mother's courtroom influence. My second wife, Vivienne, is 42. She holds the title of Director of Corporate Partnerships at a major auto conglomerate headquartered in the city. We crossed paths at an industry summit 8 years ago. She was polished, ambitious, striking, the kind of woman who knows how to walk into a room and make everyone aware of it. I was recently out of a long marriage, lonelier than I admitted to myself, and honestly more flattered than I should have been. We moved fast, maybe too fast. Her career climbed. Mine stayed the course. I told myself that was balance. It wasn't. It was a Thursday in late October when she came through the kitchen door wearing a suit that cost more than my first truck and carrying the expression of someone who has already decided something and is merely going through the formality of informing you. She poured herself a glass of wine without looking at me. "I'm heading to the conference in Indianapolis this weekend," she said. I looked up from a client proposal. The regional summit? I thought that wasn't until February. She took a long sip before answering. Different event. Executive leadership retreat. Marcus organized it for the senior team. Marcus Holt, her boss, 53 years old, regional VP, the kind of man who wore monogrammed cufflinks to casual dinners and referenced his own disruptive thinking like it was a personality trait. I'd met him twice at company functions. Both times he'd looked at me the way people look at furniture, present, functional, uninteresting. I'd filed that away. "When do you leave?" I asked. "Tomorrow. I'll be back Sunday." She didn't look up from her phone. "You're just mentioning this now." "I'm mentioning it because I'm going." "That's not a discussion, Derek." There it was, the edge in her voice that had been growing sharper for months. I set down my pen and met her eyes. "Fine. Which hotel?" She paused, just a fraction of a beat, but I caught it like a wrong note in a familiar song. "The Meridian Grand." "Nice place?" "Marcus is covering my suite. He thinks I've earned it after the Langford account closed." She said it the way people say things they believe are beneath notice, offhand, almost bored. Then she added, almost as a footnote, "I owe him a good time." 11 words. She was already turning toward the hallway, heels clicking on the hardwood. "Text me the room number," I said to her back. She stopped, turned just enough to look at me over her shoulder. "Why would you need that?" "In case something comes up." "Nothing will." She disappeared up the stairs. I sat at the kitchen table for a long time after her footsteps faded. Not spiraling, just doing the math. Then I got up, walked out to the garage, past the '68 Camaro I'd been slowly restoring, past my father's old toolbox, and opened the metal filing cabinet in the back corner. Bottom drawer, behind the accordion folder of old tax returns. 2 binders, one burgundy, one green. I'd started building them 7 months ago when the pattern of small inconsistencies became impossible to dismiss as coincidence. The late nights that ran too late, the weekends that never quite synced with the event schedules I quietly checked, the cash-out charges on our joint card that preceded trips she said were solo. Call it instinct, call it the curse of a man who thinks in systems. I called it preparation. Because if she believed I was the kind of man who would sit home quietly while she paid debts like that, she had fundamentally misread the person she married. And that miscalculation was about to become very expensive. Friday arrived under a low gray sky. Vivienne left before noon, wheeling a suitcase that seemed excessive for a 2-night stay. She called out from the driveway that she'd see me Sunday. No goodbye kiss. I waited until her car turned the corner. Then I called Paige. Hey, Dad. She picked up on the second ring. Are you free today? I need your read on something. A beat of silence, the kind that tells you someone is listening with more than just their ears. Give me 45 minutes. And she arrived in 50, still in work clothes, a tailored charcoal blazer that made her look closer to 40 than 28. She had her mother's cheekbones and my habit of seeing exactly what people are trying not to show. I handed her the burgundy binder before she'd fully sat down. She flipped through it without speaking. Her jaw tightened once, slightly, on the third page. Then she kept reading. 7 months, she said finally, give or take. The hotel charges on the same nights she told you she was logging overtime. She turned a page. 4 cities over 6 months. She looked up. Dad, does she know this exists? She has no idea. Good. Keep it that way. She closed the binder and pushed it back. I'm going to be direct with you. This is enough for a divorce attorney to proceed, and more than enough to trigger Section 8 of your prenuptial agreement. Section 8, the professional infidelity clause. You signed it 8 years ago. I helped draft it. You were worried about something like this even then. Under those terms, documented infidelity voids any spousal support entitlement and shifts asset distribution substantially in your favor. I'd pushed that clause out of my mind somewhere in the 2nd year of the marriage, the way you push a fire extinguisher into a closet, there, if needed, easier not to think about. She's in Indianapolis right now, I said, with Marcus Holt. She told me last night he's paying for her suite. Said she owes him a good time. Paige stood and walked to the window. When she turned back, there was something in her expression I recognized from watching her in court. Cold. Focused, deliberate. Marcus Holt isn't just your wife's problem, Dad. If he's using company expense accounts to fund personal relationships with subordinates, that's a governance violation. Multiple of them, probably. She picked up her phone. I have a colleague who handles corporate misconduct cases. If there's any HR history on Holt at his company, I'll know about it before tomorrow. Who are you calling? People who owe me professional courtesies. She was already typing. If Davidson's HR department has even a ghost of a complaint on record about this man, it's not going to stay quiet much longer. I looked at my daughter, this precise, fierce young woman who'd learned early that trust is a contract, not a given, and something in my chest that had been coiled tight for months finally eased just slightly into something that felt like resolve. Make the calls, I said. Saturday, 7:40 in the morning. My phone rang. Unknown number. I answered. Mr. Calloway. The voice was controlled, patrician, the vowels of someone raised on old money and private schools. My name is Serena Holt. I believe it's time we spoke. I sat up straighter. Serena Holt, Marcus's wife. I'd seen her once, briefly, at a charity function 2 years prior. She'd worn understated jewelry and an expression that suggested she was cataloging every person in the room. Mrs. Holt, this is unexpected. I imagine it is. I received a very thorough phone call last night from an attorney named Paige Calloway. A pause. Your daughter moves quickly. She does. She indicated our spouses are currently sharing accommodations at the Meridian Grand. I had already suspected something of this nature, though I lacked confirmation. I no longer do. Another pause, this one carrying weight. This is not the first time Marcus has done something like this. It is, however, the first time someone has brought me documentation rather than rumors. What are you thinking? I'm flying to Indianapolis this morning. I've reached out to a woman named Carol Finch, Senior Director of Human Resources at the company. We served on a hospital foundation board together years ago. She takes corporate ethics violations seriously and she has authority to act. I've already briefed her. A beat. I thought you might want to be present when we knock on that door. I thought about Vivienne's voice last night, the casualness, the assumption. What time does your flight land? 11:55. Meet me at the Meridian Grand at 1:30. Lobby, near the concierge desk. I'll be there. Bring your daughter, Mr. Calloway. I appreciate attorneys who don't require explanations. She ended the call before I could respond. I dialed Paige. She picked up on the first ring. Serena Holt wants us in Indianapolis today, I said. She's bringing HR. A 2-second pause. Then, I'll drive. Give me 20 minutes. Before she hung up, she added, Dad, I looked up Serena last night. Her family trust is somewhere north of 50 million. Whatever she decides to do with it, Marcus is already finished. He just doesn't know it yet. We were on the interstate by 9, 3 hours of highway through flat Midwestern farmland. Paige had printed cross-referenced documentation overnight, annotated with what she called exposure mapping, a grid of corporate policy violations, governance infractions, and potential legal exposure points organized by severity. My daughter had inherited my appetite for detail and added to it a precision I'd never quite possessed. The Meridian Grand Lobby was all marble and recessed lighting. Serena Holt was waiting near the concierge desk, exactly as she'd said. Black wool coat, minimal jewelry, expression like a weather front moving in. Beside her stood a woman in her mid-40s carrying a structured leather briefcase, Carol Finch, Senior Director of HR, with the handshake of someone accustomed to being the most consequential person in the room. Mr. Calloway. Serena extended her hand. This is Carol. She's reviewed the documentation Paige forwarded this morning. Carol turned to me. If what we find upstairs confirms the pattern your daughter outlined, we're looking at a minimum of 5 policy violations, potentially more, depending on the paper trail we find. Room number, I asked. Paige lifted her phone. Suite 2214. Vivienne texted it to you this morning. She looked at me. She probably assumed you'd never use it. Something thin and sharp crossed Serena's face that might, in different circumstances, have been a smile. Then let's not keep them waiting. The elevator ride to the 22nd floor was quiet in the way that operating rooms are quiet. Purposeful, total, charged. Carol checked the recording function on her device. Serena watched the floor numbers. Paige stood beside me, the same expression she wears when the bailiff calls the room to order. The hallway was long and carpeted and silent. Suite 2214 was the corner unit, the kind with a city view and a room rate that required a company card to justify. Faint sounds from inside, low music, muffled voices. I knocked 3 times, measured, unhurried. The music cut out. Footsteps approached, lighter than a man's, quicker. The door swung open. Vivienne stood there in a hotel robe, hair loose, wineglass in hand, wearing the easy, unguarded expression of someone who believes they're completely safe. That expression lasted approximately 1 second. Derek? Her voice climbed half an octave. What are you? Then she saw Serena, then Carol with her briefcase, then Paige, phone raised, already recording. Oh God, she whispered. May we come in? Serena's voice was arctic. I believe my husband is expecting company. Marcus Holt appeared behind Vivienne, shirt untucked, barefoot, his own wineglass catching the light. He went still when he saw his wife. Serena, listen, no need. She walked past both of them into the suite the way people walk into rooms they've decided belong to them. We followed. Carol was already photographing the desk, an open laptop with a visible expense report on the screen. Meridian Grand, corporate card, executive discretionary account, weekend rate, $2,200 per night. She typed notes into her tablet. That's $4,400 for the weekend on company funds. That's a generous interpretation of executive discretion, Paige said, still recording. Marcus set down his wineglass. Color moved through his face in waves, red to pale to something harder. This is a private matter. It ceased being private the moment you charged it to a corporate account, Carol said. Her voice was clipped and professional and entirely without sympathy. As of this moment, you are both under formal investigation for violation of the company's ethics and conduct policy, specifically undisclosed supervisory relationships and material misuse of corporate resources. Vivienne grabbed my arm. Derek, please, this is not what it looks like. I stepped back, let her hand fall. It looks exactly like what you described to me yesterday. You told me you owed your boss a good time. Looks like you're settling that account. My voice was quieter than hers, calmer. The only thing I didn't anticipate was that you'd be surprised to see me. Paige moved closer to Marcus, phone steady. Mr. Holt, for the record, are you aware that company policy requires disclosure of any romantic relationship between personnel in supervisory roles? I'm not answering that. Noted. Your silence will be entered into the formal investigation report. She turned to Carol. How many violations are we documenting? At least 5 confirmed, possibly 7, once I've reviewed the full expense history. Serena had moved to the window. She stood with her back to the room, looking out at the Indianapolis skyline, and when she spoke her voice carried across the suite like a current through still water. Marcus, I want you to understand something clearly. By Monday morning, every member of the senior leadership team will know what happened in this room. My attorney files for divorce Tuesday, and because you have violated the infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement, the one my father's attorney spent considerable time drafting, you will leave our 22 years of marriage with precisely what you arrived with. She turned from the window. I suggest you recall what that figure was. Enjoy the suite. It's the last luxury anyone else will pay for on your behalf. She walked out. Carol followed, still documenting. Paige looked at me. I looked at Vivienne. She was crying now, quiet, mascara beginning to track, the wine glass trembling. In that moment, I could see her very clearly. Not the woman I'd fallen for at a conference 8 years ago. Not the ambitious, polished version she'd built and maintained. Just a person who had made a series of choices and was standing in the middle of their consequences. The house is in my name, I said quietly. The vehicles, the accounts, everything we built together. Section 8 of our prenuptial agreement is unambiguous about professional infidelity. You should probably contact an attorney. I walked out of the suite with my daughter beside me. Behind us, the door clicked shut. Monday morning came in cold and flat. Paige called at 6:15. Dad, turn on the news, business section. I found the channel. A headline scrolling at the bottom of the screen. Regional Automotive VP Marcus Holt placed on administrative leave pending formal ethics investigation. They moved fast. Carol had the board briefed by Sunday evening. She doesn't let things sit. Paige paused. Dad, there's something else. Something I found yesterday that you need to hear. The tone in her voice made me put down my coffee. Marcus Holt was married before Serena. His first wife was named Rebecca Calloway. The name hit me somewhere between my sternum and my throat. My sister Rebecca. Yes, I pulled the marriage records. They were married 3 years, 2008 to 2011. She filed for divorce, citing adultery. I hadn't spoken to Rebecca in over 11 years. After her marriage dissolved, she had relocated to Portland and quietly severed most family connections. I'd never pushed. She'd made it clear she didn't want to revisit whatever had happened. I'd respected that and regretted it in equal measure. He cheated on Rebecca, I said, repeatedly, according to the filing, with colleagues, always at company expense, always hotels. Paige's voice was measured, but there was something underneath it. She had a breakdown during the proceedings, Dad, spent months in treatment afterward. The pieces arranged themselves with a sickening, mechanical precision. Marcus Holt hadn't just unraveled my marriage, he had destroyed my sister's life a decade and a half earlier using an identical blueprint. Does Vivienne know? Almost certainly not. Rebecca changed her name after the divorce and left Michigan years ago. A pause. But Dad, this changes the shape of everything. This isn't one incident, this is a pattern. If Rebecca is willing to go on record, combined with what we already have, we can demonstrate systematic predatory behavior spanning more than 15 years. Davidson's board won't just terminate him, they'll cooperate fully with any investigation to limit their own liability. I'm going to call her. I thought you might say that. Go carefully, this may resurface things she's spent years trying to contain. I sat in my kitchen for a while after we hung up, looking at nothing in particular. Then I dialed a number I hadn't used in over a decade. She picked up on the 4th ring. Derek. Her voice was careful, uncertain. The voice of someone who doesn't know yet whether this call is good news or bad. Rebecca. Paige reached out to you. She did. She told me about Vivienne, about Marcus. A long silence. I'm mi pareja, sorry. If I had known he was still doing this, if I'd had any idea. That's not on you. Maybe not, but I stayed quiet, Derek. I let them pay me off and sign me into silence, and I walked away and he just, her voice steadied. He kept going, found the next one, and the next. Another pause, and when she continued there was something harder underneath the words. Paige asked if I would testify. I told her yes. Rebecca, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He made me feel like nothing. Like I was something to be used and discarded. And when I tried to fight it, the company buried me with paperwork and settlement checks. I signed documents promising to stay silent, and I have, for 15 years. Her breath came slow and controlled, the rhythm of someone who has practiced this. I am done being silent. Not for Vivienne, not because of what he did to my marriage, but because if I don't say something, there will be someone else after her, and I won't have that. Thank you, I said. And I meant it in more ways than I could articulate. We're family, Derek. We should have been talking all these years. Her voice softened slightly. When this is over, let's fix that. After we hung up, I walked to the garage and stood in front of the Camaro. I'd bought it from Rebecca years ago when she left. She'd sold it quickly, needing distance from everything she associated with that period of her life. I'd told myself I was restoring it as a hobby. Now, standing in the cold of the garage, I understood it differently. It had been my way of holding a piece of her close when she wouldn't let me any closer. Maybe now I could give it back. Before you find out what happened next, and I promise you, it gets bigger from here. Check the description and the pinned comment. Everything we recommend, from performance and fitness to daily wellness, is right there waiting for you. Tuesday morning, the story broke wide. Not just local business coverage. Regional headlines. 3 television stations. Marcus Holt terminated for cause from his position following a formal ethics investigation. Gross violation of conduct policies including undisclosed supervisory relationships, systematic misuse of corporate funds, and a documented pattern of misconduct. Vivienne's name wasn't in the public statement, but corporate networks are faster than any press release, and everyone who needed to know already did. Paige forwarded me the internal memo from Carol Finch's department, clinical, thorough, and devastating in the way that only truly professional documents can be. Effective immediately, permanent separation, full cooperation with any subsequent investigation. My phone rang. Serena Holt. Have you seen the news? Her voice carried the particular satisfaction of someone who has executed something precisely. Just now, my divorce attorney filed this morning. Marcus will be served within the hour. A pause. My forensic accountant has been working since Saturday. The number is larger than I anticipated. He's been redirecting corporate funds to personal expenses for the better part of a decade. The total appears to exceed $240,000.
That's embezzlement.
That's what Davidson's legal team is calling it. Criminal charges are being evaluated. Another pause, more deliberate. Carol has also identified 3 additional employees who were involved with Marcus over the past 12 years. Your sister Rebecca appears to have been the first. The other 2 have been contacted. Now that they know they aren't alone, now that someone has made it safe to speak, they are considering coming forward. I thought about Rebecca's voice. I'm done being silent. What about Vivienne? Carol called her in this morning. She's being given a choice. Resign immediately with severance and a non-disclosure agreement, or face formal termination and exposure to civil liability for ethics policy violations. Either way, Serena let the pause carry its own weight. Her career at that company is finished. After we hung up, I sat at my desk and stared at the email from my attorney. Divorce papers ready to file. Section 8 was ironclad. Under its terms, Vivienne would leave the marriage with what she'd brought into it, which, reviewing the financial disclosures, amounted to roughly $39,000 and a leased vehicle whose payments were now 3 months behind. My phone lit up. Vivienne, I made a mistake. I love you. Please. I read it once, then I typed, my attorney will be in contact regarding the divorce proceedings. Then I forwarded the message to my lawyer with a single note, document all contact, because some words arrive too late to mean what they once meant. That afternoon, Paige appeared at my door with a bottle of 12-year bourbon and a folder. She poured 2 glasses without asking. "Rebecca flies in next week," she said. "She wants to see you and the Camaro." I nodded. Davidson's board authorized a full structural audit of Marcus's entire department. What they're finding is worse than the incident. He built a culture where advancement was conditional on compliance. Women who refused found themselves reassigned, underperformed, managed out. She raised her glass. "That culture is officially over. Carol has been authorized to redesign the entire oversight structure." We drank in quiet for a moment. "How are you doing, Dad?" I gave the question its due. Angry, sad, but mostly relieved. "I've been grieving this marriage for the better part of a year. Now at least the grieving has a direction." She looked at me the way she looks at things she wants to remember. "I'm proud of you, of Rachel, of everyone who chose not to stay quiet. You didn't have to do any of this." "Yes, I did," she smiled, "one of the real ones. I don't like watching good people get treated like they don't notice what's happening to them." The sun set over the city. Somewhere across town, Vivienne was cleaning out her office. Marcus was on the phone with a criminal defense attorney, and I was sitting with my daughter in a house that had been mine all along. It felt, for the first time in months, like I was breathing correctly. Friday afternoon, a knock at the door I wasn't expecting. My nephew Nathan stood on the porch, 19 years old, working the front desk night shift on weekends at the Meridian Grand while he put himself through community college. He had his mother's eyes and an expression that said he'd been working up to this for days. "Uncle Derek," he said, "I need you to see something." I let him in. He sat on the couch with both hands around his phone, steadying himself. I was on shift Saturday morning. I saw Vivienne check in with him. He looked up. I didn't know what to do, mi pareja. I kept working. A pause. "But then when you got there, I was on break, and I heard the commotion on the 22nd floor, and I went up." He held out the phone. The video was unsteady but unmistakable. Shot from a position in the hallway, partially obscured by a column. The audio was clear enough to follow every word. Vivienne's voice insisting it wasn't what it looked like. My response about exactly what she'd described the night before. Carol methodically cataloging violations. Serena's controlled dismissal of her husband. All of it. "Why are you bringing this to me now?" I asked. His jaw tightened. "Because Aunt Vivienne called my mom 2 nights ago. She's telling people you set the whole thing up, that you ambushed her, that she's the victim here." He met my eyes. "I was standing in that hallway, Uncle Derek. I know what I heard, and I know what I saw when she walked into that hotel with him." He stood up. "She's trying to make you the villain. I won't let her do that." After he left, I called Paige. "I need you to secure a video Nathan recorded at the Meridian Grand. Chain of custody, authentication, the whole structure. Illinois is one-party consent for recording. A public hotel hallway qualifies. It'll hold." A pause. "Dad, this is going to significantly limit her options in the divorce proceedings." She limited her own options when she started revising history. That evening, Rebecca called again. She was flying in Saturday morning. "I want to see that car," she said. "And I want to see you. It's been too long, Derek. Far too long." "It has. I'm sorry about that." "We both are." A pause. "Paige told me about the video your nephew recorded. That kid did the right thing." Her voice warmed slightly. "He gets it from his mother, I think. His mother got it from somewhere." She laughed, lighter than I remembered her voice being, fuller. "Maybe we all got it from Dad. He used to say the truth is the only thing that doesn't get heavier the longer you carry it." He was right. He usually was. Saturday morning, I picked Rebecca up from the airport. She looked different than I remembered. Older, obviously, but settled in a way she hadn't been in the years before the estrangement. Seattle had given her something. We drove most of the way back in that particular kind of quiet that exists between people who don't need to fill the space. When I pulled into the garage and she saw the Camaro, she stopped moving for a moment. "You kept it," she said softly. "I've been restoring it." She walked around it slowly, her hand trailing over the body panels. I sold it because every time I looked at it, I saw him. Every drive, every memory, all of it contaminated. She was quiet for a moment. And now it's just a car, I said. A beautiful car that your brother decided was worth keeping. She looked at me over the roof of the Camaro. Thank you, Derek. We spent the afternoon in the garage, working side by side the way we used to as teenagers, elbow deep in an engine and talking without looking at each other, the way certain conversations are easiest. She told me about Seattle, about her husband who teaches history at a public school, about the practice she'd built helping women navigate recovery from coercive relationships. I turned what he did to me into something useful, she said, wiping her hands on a shop rag. Mitchell tried to break me down to nothing. Instead, I spent 15 years learning how to help other women rebuild. She thought about it. That's not justice exactly, but I'll take it. That's more than justice, I said. That's transformation. She smiled. We'll call it both. That evening, Paige arrived for dinner, and for the first time in longer than I could honestly measure, 3 members of my family sat around a table together building something instead of surviving something. His attorney called today, Paige said, serving herself. They want to settle before the criminal investigation advances any further. Full admission of the affair, no contest to the divorce terms, reimbursement of legal fees, and a signed written acknowledgement of the pattern of misconduct with employees. Rebecca set down her fork. He also releases me from the NDA, fully and unconditionally, non-negotiable. I'll add it to the terms. Paige looked at both of us. If he wants to avoid criminal charges, he'll agree. All of it. We raised our glasses, water for me, wine for them, and toasted something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in a long time. Genuine, uncomplicated hope. Marcus's attorney agreed to every term by Monday morning. The documents arrived by courier that afternoon. Full admission. No contest to the divorce. Release of Rebecca's NDA signed and notarized, and a check covering legal fees. He was trying to make it disappear. But certain things, once they've been seen clearly, cannot be made to disappear. Tuesday morning, I sat at my desk and wrote. Not for a courtroom, not for an attorney's filing, for whoever needed to read it. A LinkedIn post, measured and factual, about corporate accountability and the culture of silence that lets predatory behavior persist when institutions choose careers over people. I didn't name Marcus or Vivienne directly. I wrote about my sister, a woman who had been silenced by an NDA for 15 years and had finally found her way to speaking. I wrote about documentation and patience, about the particular power that belongs to people who are underestimated. Then I posted it. Within 2 hours, 300 views. By midday, 4,000. By evening, it was circulating through automotive industry networks with more than 50,000 engagements. The comments filled with accounts, women from multiple companies, different industries, same story. Executives who had treated their positions as licenses, HR departments that had chosen institutional protection over basic decency, settlements that had bought silence long enough for the pattern to repeat. 2 former employees of Marcus's company contacted me directly. Both had been in relationships with him that began as professional pressure and ended in silenced exits. Both had signed documents. Both were now considering whether those documents could still contain them. You gave people permission to speak, Paige told me that night. The following Wednesday, a reporter sat in my office. We talked for 90 minutes. I gave her the timeline, the documentation, the architecture of it. Not with bitterness, not with performance, just with the facts arranged in their proper sequence. What outcome are you hoping for? She asked. Real consequences. Not settlements and quiet reassignments, actual accountability that other people in those positions can see and reckon with. The article published Thursday morning. It was detailed, sourced, and entirely factual. Davidson Automotive stock dipped by market close. Their communications department issued a statement by afternoon. Words about culture and commitment and zero tolerance, the standard architecture of institutional self-defense. Better than silence. Not enough, but something. Vivienne texted that evening. You destroyed everything I built just to hurt me. I replied once. I documented your choices. You made them. Then I blocked her number. Friday. Elaine, Serena, called with the final development. The Michigan Attorney General's office has opened a formal investigation. Embezzlement, fraud, and multiple counts of workplace harassment. 7 women, Derek. 7 over 15 years. Your sister was the first. Her voice carried the measured satisfaction of someone who has executed something with precision and can finally acknowledge it. He'll almost certainly take a plea. 2 to 5 years. Permanent prohibition from corporate leadership positions. Restitution to the company and to the women he harmed. He thought the position made him untouchable, I said. Most of them do. That's why they need to see what happens when they're wrong. She paused. Your post was the turning point. It made it possible for other women to come forward. Without their testimony, the AG's case would have been thin. With it, it's airtight. After we hung up, I walked to the garage. Rebecca was there, putting finishing touches on the Camaro's engine bay, hands deep in the work we'd been sharing for days. It's ready, she said, stepping back to look at it. Yeah, I said, it is. The divorce hearing took place on a gray Tuesday in late January, 3 months after the Meridian Grand. Paige and I arrived early, dressed professionally, briefcases full of documentation we had organized meticulously and would probably not need to open. Vivienne sat across the courtroom with a young attorney who looked like she was managing expectations rather than building a case. Vivienne had lost weight. Her suit hung differently than it used to. Her eyes carried the particular quality of someone who has spent months watching the shape of their life change into something they didn't choose. The judge reviewed Section 8 of the prenuptial agreement with the unhurried thoroughness of someone who intends to get it right. Then she reviewed the evidence: hotel records, corporate card charges, Nathan's authenticated video, Carol Finch's formal HR investigation findings, Marcus's signed admission from the settlement. Miss Vance, the judge said, addressing Vivienne by her maiden name, do you contest any of the evidence presented regarding your relationship with Marcus Holt? Vivienne's attorney leaned close, a whispered consultation. Then, no, Your Honor. Do you contest the applicability of Section 8 of the prenuptial agreement? Another pause. No, Your Honor. The judge wrote something, looked up. Given the clear and documented evidence of professional infidelity as defined under the terms of the prenuptial agreement, this court finds in favor of the petitioner. Miss Vance will retain only the assets she held individually prior to the marriage, plus personal belongings. All jointly acquired assets, including the marital residence, vehicles, and investment accounts, remain with Mr. Calloway. The gavel. Paige put her hand on my shoulder briefly, the kind of gesture that doesn't need words. Outside the courthouse, Rebecca was waiting on the steps. She'd flown in that morning, sitting in the back of the gallery during the hearing. She linked her arm through mine as I came through the doors. How does it feel? She asked. Like the end of something that should have ended sooner. I looked up at the sky, and like the beginning of something I can actually build. Good. She squeezed my arm. Because I have news. Marcus accepted the plea agreement. June sentencing. 3 to 5 years. Restitution to Davidson Automotive and to the 7 women. She looked at me. He's done. That evening, the 3 of us, Paige and Rebecca and me, at my kitchen table with the windows lit warm against the winter dark. What's next? Paige asked. The firm, I said. I've been running it small to make room for someone else's ambitions. That's done. New hires, new contracts, new scope. I looked at both of them. I spent 8 years making myself manageable. I'm not interested in that anymore. Rebecca raised her glass. To getting bigger. We drank to that. To new things built on ground that had finally been cleared. 15 months later, I stood in the garage looking at the empty space where the Camaro used to sit. Rebecca had driven it back to Portland the previous week, finally ready to reclaim what the car had once been before it became associated with pain, ready to let it be a beautiful thing again without the weight. The consulting firm had expanded into new offices downtown. 3 new hires, 2 major manufacturing contracts. A scope of work I'd been capable of for years and simply hadn't pursued. Turns out the space I'd been taking up was exactly the right size when I stopped apologizing for it. Paige stopped by one Saturday afternoon with coffee and updates. Marcus reported to federal prison last month. 4 years, non-negotiable. 3 years supervised release afterward. Permanent bar from any corporate leadership role. She sat across from me. And Vivienne, last I heard, she's working in administrative support in Grand Rapids. Studio apartment, $42,000 a year. She paused. She tried to connect with me on LinkedIn recently. What did you do? Declined. She said it without drama, the way you close a window you don't need open. Davidson settled with all 7 women, undisclosed amounts. But Rebecca told me her portion is funding an engineering scholarship program for women entering the automotive industry. Paige looked at her coffee. Something decent came from all of it. Later that evening, I drove to the waterfront and watched the river move. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Hi, is this Derek Calloway? My name is Claire. Paige gave me your number. She thought we might get coffee sometime, if you're open to it. I read the message twice. Paige had been suggesting something like this for 6 months. I'd been telling her I wasn't ready. I sat with the message for a long moment, watching the river, and realized I wasn't sure that was still true. I'd like that, I typed back. How's next Saturday? The reply came in under a minute. Perfect. Looking forward to it. I put the phone in my pocket and watched the last of the light leave the water. Somewhere in Michigan, Marcus was counting the first months of a prison term he had built. Decision by decision, over 15 years of believing that power was the same thing as permission. Vivienne was rebuilding a life in a city she hadn't chosen, smaller in every dimension than the one she'd traded away. Rebecca was in Portland, windows open, a restored car in the driveway. And I was here. Some people talk about revenge like it's the point. It never was. The point was documentation, patience, the refusal to perform ignorance when you're not ignorant, the willingness to let consequences find the choices that earned them, and then to step back and let them land. I'd been underestimated. I'd been managed and maneuvered and quietly dismissed. And when the moment came, I hadn't needed theater or confrontation. I'd needed a folder, a daughter who inherited the right instincts, and a sister who finally found her voice. The river moved. The light was gone. I drove home through quiet streets to a house that was mine in every sense of the word. Bought with my money, held in my name, filled now only with what I had actually chosen. Clean, quiet, entirely, finally mine.